Dad gave the family farm to my brother, so I bought the land around it and cut off all access. I didn't yell, didn't throw a fit, didn't even raise an eyebrow. When Dad slid that deed across the table toward Cody with a smirk and said, "It's all yours, son," I just nodded, got up from the table and walked out the back door. You see, I've never been the loud one in the family. That was always Cody's thing, being loud, flashy, impossible to ignore. Me? I'm more the quiet type. I think before I talk, I fix things before I complain, and I learned long ago that in our family, being steady got you respect from strangers but none from your old man. I live about 10 minutes from the farm in a beat-up trailer on 5 acres I cleared myself. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. Built the porch by hand. Got a couple goats and a decent vegetable patch. In the evenings, I sit out with a cold beer and watch the sun drop behind the silo in the distance. His silo now, I guess. Growing up, I poured everything I had into that farm, milking cows before school, mucking stalls on weekends, fixing busted fences when I should have been out with friends. I knew the old tractor like the back of my hand by the time I was 15. Hell, I rebuilt its transmission the summer I turned 16. Dad used to grunt his approval in that way he did, without actually saying good job. I thought that meant something. Then there was Cody, 3 years younger, always quick with a joke and quicker to disappear when work needed doing. While I was tossing hay bales, he was out getting drunk behind the gas station with his high school buddies. Got fired from 2 part-time jobs before he was 20. Picked up for DUI at 21. Still, Dad just laughed it off. He's just figuring things out, Dad would say. You, Darren, you've always had your head on straight. But Cody's got spark. Spark. That was Dad's favorite word when it came to Cody, as if screwing around and making a mess of everything meant he had some hidden brilliance waiting to shine through. I used to think maybe he did. I waited years for that spark to catch fire, but all it ever did was burn through second chances. Dad was a hard man. Old school, some would say. Grew up in a time when showing emotion was weakness, and the only way to prove your worth was to outwork everyone else. He was the kind of guy who'd shake your hand like it was a test of manhood and never once said "I love you" without a few beers in him. And Mom was the quiet glue holding it all together. Sweet, soft-spoken, always trying to balance out the testosterone storm in the house. She kept the peace, patched us up, made Sunday dinner even when we didn't deserve it. I used to see her crying in the kitchen sometimes, back turned to the door, thinking no one noticed. But I noticed. I always noticed. The farm's been in our family for 3 generations. 100 acres of rolling fields, a red colonial-style house with white trim, and that big old barn that creaks like it's sighing every time the wind picks up. The gravel road leading up to it splits off from the county highway and twists through a row of oaks older than my grandfather. It's the kind of place folks slow down to look at, even if they've passed it 100 times. I thought I'd inherit it one day, not because I felt entitled to it, but because I'd earned it. I knew every inch of that land. I kept it running when Dad threw out his back, when Cody was off God knows where. But in the end, none of that mattered. Dad made his choice. He gave the whole damn place to the golden boy. Said Cody needed him more, that maybe the responsibility would shape him up. Like land and livestock were some kind of rehab program. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he saw too much of himself in Cody. Or maybe he just didn't want the farm going to someone who reminded him too much of how tired and bitter he'd become. Whatever the reason, I didn't argue, because I already had a plan. And it started the moment I walked out that back door. The night Dad made the announcement, we were all gathered around the old pine dinner table, the same one he built before Cody was born. It was one of those rare evenings when everyone was actually home. Mom had made her famous pot roast, mashed potatoes, cornbread from scratch. It almost felt like one of those warm family moments you see on greeting cards. Until he cleared his throat and said, "I want to make something clear while I've still got my mind sharp." We all looked up. Cody was half tuned out, scrolling on his phone with a beer in the other hand. I had a bad feeling in my gut. That slow tightening, like something was about to snap, but you couldn't see where. Dad leaned back, pride all over his face like he'd just won a trophy. I finalized the paperwork today. The farm's officially Cody's. I didn't say anything. I didn't even blink. Just kept chewing slowly, like the words hadn't landed yet. He went on. "You, Darren. You've always been resourceful. You'll make your own way. Cody, Well, this might be what finally puts him on the right track, gives him purpose, something to hold on to. Like hell it would. I pushed my chair back, careful not to let it scrape. The room was quiet now. Even Cody had looked up. But I wasn't going to give them a show. I wasn't going to fight for what should have been obvious. I just nodded once, said okay, and walked out the back door into the night. I knew it was a possibility. I'd seen it coming, like dark clouds on the edge of the sky, slow but steady. Still, some part of me, the foolish, hopeful part, had held out. I thought maybe, just maybe, all those years of keeping things running, of stepping up, would matter. Turns out I'd been raised to be the spare tire, the dependable backup, the one who could always figure it out. And yeah, I could figure it out. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt like hell. I opened it, and there was Mom, wrapped in her old sweater, eyes red-rimmed and glassy. She looked so small out there in the porch light. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat at the edge of the couch like she didn't want to take up too much space. Like maybe if she stayed small enough, the weight of the world wouldn't crush her. You don't have to explain, I said gently. I know. She shook her head. I argued. I told him it wasn't fair. But your father's, he's just so stubborn, I finished. Yeah, I know. Her voice cracked. It should have been yours, Darren. You were always there. I sat beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me like she used to when I was a boy and had skinned my knee. You did everything you could, Mom, I said softly. I'm okay. Really. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I could hear crickets chirping outside, the old wind chimes clinking softly against the trailer wall. When she left, I walked her back to her car and stood watching the red taillights disappear down the dirt road. And that's when I knew I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight the way Dad probably expected me to. But I would make things right, not for revenge, for balance, for justice. For every morning I was up at 5 dragging hoses through frozen mud while Cody slept in. For every time Dad looked right through me to smile at his favorite. For Mom, who cried in the kitchen more than anyone ever noticed. That night, I made a quiet decision. If they thought I'd just walk away, they hadn't been paying attention all these years. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was spinning, not with anger, not with sadness. With ideas, with logistics. Dad gave Cody the farm, fine. But the land around it, that was another story. By morning, I'd already pulled up old county maps and land records. Some of them I had in a plastic storage bin under my bed, notes scribbled in pencil from years ago. I'd always been interested in who owned what, where old fence lines used to run, how the road shifted over time. Turns out, it was mostly old-timers and distant cousins who'd inherited parcels they hadn't seen in years. One plot used to belong to a man named Earl Watkins. He passed it on to his daughter, who moved to Arizona in '94. Another was an overgrown stretch of pasture owned by the grandkids of the Hemmings family, none of whom had ever stepped foot on it. I started with the gravel road, the only road that led to the farm from the main highway. Technically, it wasn't part of the deed Dad handed to Cody. It belonged to Mrs. Lorraine Hicks, a widow who lived alone in a double-wide about 20 minutes away. She hadn't driven in years, and her nephews had been pestering her to sell for ages. So I paid her a visit. "Morning, ma'am," I said, taking off my cap as she opened the screen door. "Darren Cole," she said, squinting at me. "Haven't seen you since you were in diapers." We chatted for a while. She offered me a glass of lemonade, and we sat on her porch, watching the wind ripple across the soy fields. I didn't lie to her. I just didn't spell it all out. "I'd be interested in buying that old access road you still have title to," I said. "I know it's not much use to you now, and I'd offer a fair price." She blinked a few times. "Well, Lord knows I'm not using it. Been meaning to take care of that mess for years. How much you talking?" We shook on it the next day. Then came the southern tree line, a small but strategic patch of woods that sat right between the old barn and the well road. It had been inherited by 2 brothers who lived upstate and hadn't touched it in over a decade. I tracked them down, made my pitch, and cut them a check they hadn't expected but were happy to cash. Piece by piece, I kept going. The pasture east of the silo? Bought it from a retired vet who moved to Florida. The strip that led to the central water line? That one took a little digging, but eventually I found the owner, a woman named June McAllister, whose father used to lease it to my granddad back in the day. She hadn't been back in years and didn't want the headache of managing land taxes, all perfectly legal. Every title transferred, every signature notarized. I hired a lawyer out of Jackson County to handle the paperwork, a sharp guy with round glasses and a voice like a radio announcer. I told him I wanted everything airtight, no loopholes, no questions. "Sure you don't want to tell me the reason behind all this?" he asked with a chuckle one afternoon. "Nope," I said, deadpan. "Just dot the I's and cross the T's." He nodded. "You got it." Within 6 weeks, I owned nearly every piece of land surrounding the farm. Not that anyone paid attention. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't gloat. But I watched. And Cody? Cody was having the time of his life. He'd posted a picture of himself on a brand new John Deere, beer in hand, the caption reading, "Living the dream, baby." Another one popped up of him hosting a barbecue. Shirts off, red Solo cups everywhere, someone doing donuts in the field with a four-wheeler. Then there was the whiskey night. Him and some buddies lined up on the farmhouse porch, bottles of cheap bourbon and cigars clenched between their teeth. The caption? "Farm life hits different when you're the boss." He had no clue, not a single one. And that was the best part, because while he was playing king of the hill, I was quietly buying the hill, and the roads, the fences, the trees, and the water under it. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't loud, I was just building. The call came early, around 6:45 a.m. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug and watching the morning mist roll through the pines when my phone buzzed. It was Cody's foreman. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later it rang again, then again. By the fourth time I answered. "Yeah?" I said. "Darren, hey, it's Mike. We got a problem. We came up to start clearing the north field, but someone's put up a metal gate. Big red sign, private property, no trespassing." I sipped my coffee. "That's so?" "Yeah, and there's a lock on it. Says to contact the landowner." "That'd be me," I said. "Appreciate the heads up." Click. About 30 minutes later, I heard the rumble of tires on gravel. I stepped outside and saw Cody's old pickup flying down the drive like a bat out of hell, dust kicking up behind him. He didn't even bother parking. Just skidded to a stop in front of my trailer, door already swinging open before the truck fully settled. He slammed the door behind him, stomping up to my porch like he was ready to start a fight. "You serious right now?" he barked. "What the hell is this, Darren?" I leaned against the porch post, calm as a preacher on Sunday morning. "Morning to you too. Don't play dumb. That gate, the sign, the damn lock." He pointed down the road like I didn't know what he was talking about. "You blocked access to my land." I shrugged. "Technically, it's my land. I bought it. You're out of your damn mind. What is this, some kind of twisted revenge plot?" "Nope," I said simply. "Just a legal land purchase. I'm within my rights. You want to use that road, we can talk about a lease." Cody's face turned red. "A lease? Are you insane?" I looked at him square. "You're the farmer now. Figure it out." He paced in a small circle, hands in his hair like he was trying to keep his skull from splitting open. "Dad gave me that farm. It's our family land. You don't get to just—" "I didn't take the farm," I said, cutting him off. "That was Dad's call. I just bought everything around it. Legally." His mouth opened, then shut. I could see the wheels turning, slow and rusty. "You're punishing me. You're punishing Dad." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting what I worked for. I gave 30 years to that land, same as you. Only difference is, I never walked away from it." He stood there fuming, fists clenched like a kid denied his favorite toy. Then he turned on his heel, stormed back to his truck, and peeled out, gravel flying. That should have been the end of it, at least for the day. But around noon, my phone rang again. I let it ring twice before answering. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He barked before I could even say hello. "Don't start with the pleasantries. Cody told me everything." "You locked him out of the North Road?" "I didn't lock him out," I replied. "I locked my land. He just happens to be boxed in. This is childish, Darren. Real men don't play games like this." I stared out the window at the stretch of trees I now owned. Funny, I'm not playing games. I'm enforcing property rights. That's how real men handle business, isn't it? There was a pause on the line. Then, "I raised you better than this." "No, you raised me to be invisible," I said calmly. "To work hard, stay quiet, and step aside so your golden boy could screw up without consequences." You're bitter. That's what this is. I smiled bitterly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the only one who follows the rules and still ends up with nothing. You're brothers, he said sharply. Family. I took a slow breath. Then maybe you should have treated us like equals. Click. I let the silence sit in the trailer for a long time after that. No more calls came that day. And I didn't go anywhere. I just sat on the porch and watched the gate. Because Cody's kingdom had no roads now, and the farmer without access was just a man with dirt. Cody never was one to give up easy, especially when giving up meant admitting he wasn't in control. A few days after our last little standoff, I noticed fresh tire tracks cutting through the edge of the Johnsons' old orchard. Then came a knock on my door. Mr. Johnson himself, holding a photo from one of the trail cams I'd helped him set up last winter. Cody's truck, deep in the mud. One wheel sunk. He tore up the fence, Mr. Johnson said, voice tight, tried to drive right through. Thought you'd want to know. I did. I thanked him and emailed the photo to my attorney. The next morning, Cody got a formal letter, not from me, but from a law office in town. It included the photo, a notice of trespassing, and a lease proposal. 1 road access route, 1 acre for utility easement. Annual rent, $12,000, land upkeep required. It was more than fair considering the damage he'd done already. Cody didn't take it well. He called at lunch, didn't even say hello. You trying to ruin me? He shouted the moment I picked up. Nope. Just offering a legal solution, I said. Calm, steady. You want to run that farm, you need access. I'm giving you a way to get it. 12 grand a year? Are you on drugs? Market rate, I said. Actually below it. And I'll cover legal fees if you sign before end of the month. He went quiet for a moment, then roared, You're sick. You're seriously messed up in the head. We're family, Darren. Exactly, I said, leaning back in my chair. That's why I don't trust you. Click. About an hour later, I got a text from Dad. We need to talk. Barn, 6 p.m. No lawyers, just us. I knew that tone. It was the same one he used when I was 13 and broke the drive chain on the baler. The tone of a man who expected submission disguised as conversation. Still, I went. The barn looked smaller than it used to, or maybe I'd just gotten taller, older, more tired of seeing it through the lens of obligation. Dad was there already, arms crossed, a half-empty thermos of coffee on the workbench. The old punching bag still hung in the corner, worn and taped in places. You think you're the only one who's had it rough? He said, voice low. I built this place from nothing. You boys had shoes, school, a roof, because I bled into this land. I never forgot that, I said. But bleeding for something doesn't mean you get to bleed everyone else dry. He glared. You've made your point, Darren. You've humiliated your brother, cut off the farm. Now you're shaking him down for rent, like some banker. It's not about the money. Then what the hell is it about? I looked him in the eye. Respect, boundaries. You giving the farm to Cody without even talking to me. That was the final straw. But it wasn't the first. He scoffed. So this is revenge? No, I said. This is clarity. He stepped closer. You want to tear this family apart over a few acres of dirt? I didn't move. No, Dad. I just don't want you to tear it apart again. There was a silence between us. Heavy, loaded. Years of things we never said hanging in the air. You used to be better than this. He muttered finally. No, I said. I used to be quieter. Then I walked out of the barn and left the door wide open. The sky was a pale, brittle blue, the kind that only shows up in late October. I stood by the split rail fence that marked the edge of the land I'd bought, the northern stretch that once connected the farmhouse to the rest of the valley. Leaves crunched under my boots as the wind picked up. Somewhere behind me, a hawk cried. The field beyond was golden with dying grass, waving softly like it didn't know winter was coming. Then I heard the engine. My father's old Ford crawled up the gravel road, same truck he'd had since I was a teenager. He parked just short of the gate, got out slowly, stiff like the years were finally catching up to his bones. We didn't shake hands. Still playing King of the Hill? He asked, nodding toward the locked gate. I'm just standing on my land, I said. He didn't laugh, didn't even smirk, just shoved his hands in the pockets of his barn jacket and stared out over the field. This your end game? Cut your brother off, humiliate him in front of the whole county? No, I said. My end game is to not spend the rest of my life cleaning up Cody's messes while being told I should be grateful for the chance. He shook his head. You always thought you were better than him. I always had to be better, I said sharply, because he never was, and you knew it. His jaw clenched. He's your brother. And that used to mean something, I said. But I'm not protecting him anymore. Not when he's 20 grand in debt to Jack Danner. You know, the guy who sells stolen farm equipment behind the gas station? Dad blinked. Yeah, I went on. And the new pickup? Lost it in a poker game last month. It's sitting behind a bar in Franklin, and the guy he owes is threatening to tow it. He told me it was in the shop. It was, I said, until he couldn't pay the mechanics. The wind blew again. A dry leaf got caught in the fence wire and fluttered like it wanted to escape. I didn't raise you to be cruel, Dad said quietly. No, I replied. You raised me to survive him. He didn't respond, just stood there, staring out over the land like it might give him answers if he looked long enough. After a while, he turned back toward his truck. I'll tell him to call you, he muttered. You can, I said. But the lease terms haven't changed. He paused at the door, hand on the handle. His back to me. I did, I said. You just didn't want to see it. He got in the truck, drove off without another word. I stood there for a long time, watching the dust settle, feeling the weight of a silence that had lasted most of my life, the silence between being a son and being a man. The silence around the farmhouse grew heavier by the day. Cody's once loud bragging on social media faded into nothingness. His posts about new tractors and late-night barbecues disappeared like they'd never existed. I could almost hear the weight of the mess he was sinking into, even from 10 miles away in my trailer. Then came the call from one of his workers. The well's dry. Pipes run through your land, and the rent's not paid, the voice said, rough and tired. We've lost a few cows already. Can't keep 'em alive without water. That hit harder than I expected. Seeing the consequences of my actions wasn't easy, but I reminded myself this wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness. A couple of days later, a letter arrived, official, cold, and to the point. The farm was up for sale. Not that it meant much. The note made it clear no serious buyers were interested without access. The locked gates, the private property signs, the tangled ownership of the surrounding acres, it all scared them off. I sat at my worn kitchen table staring at the letter as the sun dropped low outside the trailer window. A weight settled on my chest, but it wasn't regret. It was resolve. Late that evening, my mother showed up. She looked older than I remembered. The kind of tired that doesn't wash off with sleep. Her eyes held a quiet desperation I hadn't seen before. He's not managing, she said softly. The debts, the drinking. I think he's giving up. I swallowed hard. You want me to step in? She nodded, tears brimming. Please, Darren. You're the only one who can save the farm. Save him. I looked out at the dark fields, imagining the house with no life inside it, the barn empty, the legacy slipping away. Her face fell. Then what will you do? I'm going to buy the farm. She blinked, confused. Every acre, every fence post. I'm done standing in the shadows. I'll take control, not because I want to hurt him, but because I want to fix what's been broken. For the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. That night, I lay awake thinking about how family isn't just blood or property. It's respect, responsibility, and sometimes tough love. Dad might have made his choice years ago, but I was going to make mine now. The office was small and cramped, the kind of place where you could hear every creak in the floor and every whisper in the next room. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and polished wood, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat across from the real estate agent, my fingers tightening around the contract as I glanced at the numbers. The price was shockingly low, almost half the farm's market value. Cody's debts and the lack of access had driven the sellers desperate. I caught a glimpse of Cody sitting quietly in the corner. His usual bravado was nowhere to be found. His hands trembled, barely able to hold the cup of coffee they'd brought him. His eyes avoided mine, fixed somewhere on the table between us like it was a safe place. Dad didn't show up, not that I expected him to. Mom was there, though, quiet and steady, as if trying to hold the room together with just her presence. She caught my eye once and gave me a small nod, a gesture full of unspoken support. We signed the papers one by one. Every signature felt like a closing door, a door on the past that had held so much hurt and disappointment. When the last pen stroke was made, Mom quietly stood up and came over to me. She pulled me into a gentle hug. I could feel the years of worry and hope wrapped up in that embrace. "You did the right thing, Darren," she whispered, her voice cracked but sure. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let this harden you. Don't let bitterness win." I pulled back and looked at her, a soft smile creeping onto my face. "No, Mom," I said. "I'm not going to be bitter. I just want to work, to build, to make this farm what it was always meant to be." She smiled back, a flicker of pride shining through her tired eyes. The weight of the moment settled around me as I thought about what lay ahead. The land was mine now, every inch of it. The past wouldn't change, but the future? That was a story I could write myself, and this time I'd do it on my terms. Months passed, the kind of months that didn't rush or shout but quietly carried change in their wake. The farm began to breathe again. The tractors rumbled through the fields with purpose, the once barren soil now rich and turned, ready to feed new life. New cows were brought in, their soft lowing blending with the hum of machines and the whisper of the wind through the tall grasses. I worked from dawn till dusk, my hands calloused but steady, my mind finally at ease in the rhythm of the land. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, I spotted a familiar figure driving slowly along the gravel road that bordered the farm. Dad. He pulled his truck to a stop at the edge of the property, just beyond where my land began. For a moment, he sat there, silent, staring out over the fields, at the crops thriving under the care of someone else. I saw him, standing still for a heartbeat that felt like an eternity. But I didn't wave. I didn't approach. Instead, I wiped the sweat from my brow and turned back to my work. The hay needed baling, the fence needed fixing, and the life I was building wasn't going to wait for an apology I'd never get. Inside, I thought, he'll never admit he was wrong. Never say the words I wanted to hear. But honestly, I don't need them anymore. The silence between us was no longer heavy. It was simply a space where the past lived, but where I refused to dwell. As the last light faded, I found myself standing at the edge of my land, looking out over the fields I now owned, the future spreading out like the horizon itself. Funny, I thought. He once said I'd never be man enough to run this place. Well, here I am, owning every damn inch around it.